Terence, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for joining us. You call it a discovery, which is quite interesting. What does that mean?
Well, it means that, we publish a series of heritage readers. And sorry, now I have a dog barking.
He's welcome to.
My apologies. So we publish a series of heritage readers, and we've done a huge amount of research across several areas to find stories that we can write about for inclusion in the series. And our research at the University of Pretoria led us to discover this collection of writings, as you say, in 7 indigenous languages. Siswati and Isindebele were at that time not written languages.
So where were these works? Where were they laying around, and how did this discovery come about?
They are currently held by the Special Collections Unit of the Department of Library Services at the University of Pretoria. As you say, they were written between 1930 and 1950. They are comprised of a handwritten manuscript and then a typewritten on a typewriter, contemporary with the writings themselves. And both of those sets of documents are in the process of being scanned in by the university. At this stage, they've scanned in just over half of the 891 odd writings. And we are in the process of translating those writings which have been scanned in.
Sure. And what sort of subjects are covered in the writings?
Everything imaginable. Traditional rights and practices, traditional law, building construction, folklore, all sorts of issues are covered. And what I find absolutely startling, I was reading a document written by a gentleman called Shilubana in 1939. Now, he was a Bankuna, and if you know a bit about the Bankuna, the Shilubanas are part of the royal family. So he probably would have been a grandchild of the Hosi Shilubana who, in fear of Shoshangan, was traveling with Shoshangan towards Kalanga, which is Zimbabwe. And it was at that point that he decided that he should part ways with the Amashangana, and he headed westwards towards Zanin, where they settled. Now, we hear the story from possibly the king's grandson himself. So one wonders whether it was the king who told him the story or whether it was the king's son, Muhlaba I, who told him the story.
Tell us about the author of a Sesotho sa Leboa work in 1939.
Well, we've come across a writing, as you say, in Sesotho sa Leboa, and at the completion of the work, the author states that he wrote this document after interviewing the oldest man in the village, who was considered to be about 80 years old. Now, if you do the maths, and my maths is not very good, you can work out that the old man must have been born somewhere between, say, 1850 and 1860. And what we say in our document is if you then consider that that old man may have heard stories about his people from his grandfather, those stories would take us back to the late 1700s. So it's absolutely incredible that these tales go so far back. And it just kind of reignites the oral tradition, if you like. It takes us back about 3 generations.
I found this quite fascinating. Tell us about Amahumusha, a group that very little was known about previously.
Yeah, well, I picked up on that because I'm fairly au fait with clan names in Southern Africa. And Amahumusha was totally new to me. And what it transpires, it's a work by Frederick Vilakazi. It transpires that these people were a group of mixed ethnicity. There were Amazulu among them, isiZulu speakers. There were white people apparently living with them. And they spoke Afrikaans and isiZulu. And they followed to some degree the culture of the Abanguni. They had a king, for instance, an Nkosi, but that Nkosi was selected rather than a hereditary chief. And the other name that was used for these people is Amahazimani. And we believe that Amaha is Amaka, the old way of saying of. And Zimani is an area in Mozambique. They also said of themselves that they were the descendants of slaves. So we are now investigating the possibility that these are people of Mozambican origin who were slaves that then moved into South Africa.
What do we know about the authors? Did they sign any of the writings? Can we trace who the people that actually wrote this all those years ago are?
Well, we're attempting to do that. One of the authors is an extremely well-known journalist, and indeed this is R.R.R. Dromo, and he worked for Ilanga, and he was also the author of the first novel published in isiZulu. That was way back in 1929, so he's very well known. Most of the others appear to be teachers. I came across recently one male nurse from Limpopo, but living at that time in Kensington. He gives a street address in Kensington as his home address. But what we are doing is we, on our website, have listed all of the works on an Excel spreadsheet that are filed by, or data sorted rather, by language. And we also have a list of all of the authors together with the last known addresses of those authors where we have them. And I'm thrilled to say that we have already traced the relatives of one author in the Eastern Cape. And it looks as though we may have identified the relatives of a second author who wrote about Bakata Bahapela, who they currently reside in the Northwest, the descendants of that author.
Sure, and you still have 59 writings in Setswana on the Bakatla that await translation. Just before we let you go, in terms of ownership and copyright, how does that work? Who then owns this body of work?
The university hold the material that they have for public consumption, so to speak. So they are in the public domain. Obviously, we are transcribing the indigenous languages into the current orthography, and then we are translating those into English. And clearly, at this stage, we would be considered to be the owners of the copyright in those translations and in those re-orthographized works. But the plan is obviously to make these materials available as quickly as possible and to as wide an audience as possible.
Terence, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Terence Ball is from the South Africa Heritage Publishers.